Hi, my name is Kendall Grinder. I work in the University Career Center. We are located now in Summerfield Hall, so you all are more than welcome to come see us at any time. You can come and talk about, we have an interview coming up. You can come do a mock interview. You're more than welcome to come and just ask about if this field is right for you and the types of things you can do within it. We're more than welcome to talk to anybody and learn about you and what you need from us. Additionally, we have lots of events throughout the year, so you get a lot of obnoxious emails from us, I'm sure. But please read those because we do a lot of great events like this throughout the year. So we're going to start with our panel now. So we just want to go down the line and maybe Kate, start with you and just tell us a little bit about you, just briefly, so we can introduce all of you all to the audience.
Okay. Kate Weinstock. I'm a strategist at DEG Digital. Our headquarters are in Overland Park, right off Metcalf. And we have a lot of different locations throughout the U.S. and the world. We just bought out a couple other companies and acquired them. I'm a graduate at KU, graduated in 2009. Feels like just yesterday, but it was a while ago now. And I'm excited to be here. I hope you guys have a lot of great questions. I'll try and share with you kind of experiences that I've had. I will tell you that I love negotiating. My friends will tell you that. I negotiated the crap out of getting my car for really cheap. I got half off my wedding dress. I love to negotiate. I'm a strategist at DEG, so what that means is I help a lot of different companies who are our clients, like AMC, Walmart, Louis Vuitton, Moet Hennessy, what their email strategy is, how they can best interact with their customers, and build a great experience across multiple channels.
I'm Lakeisha Scott, and I work for Honeywell in the Kansas City area, and so we are federally contracted by Department of Energy. So we design and manufacture components for nuclear weapons, so to keep us all safe here in the United States. So I actually work in staffing as well as a diversity specialist there at that campus. So I work with all of our interns, our fresh out grads, so I'm always talking about salaries and those types of things with all of our grads that are coming in. So I highly focus on recruiting engineers, and so I definitely partner with KU to look at talent, top talent, so we can recruit to Honeywell. But I've been in HR for over 20 years. And so I love that space. I love working with people. And I do a lot of career coaching. So this is a great topic, and thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing that information. And so I'm looking forward to this discussion and questions that you guys have.
I'm Ashley Kuja. I am representing the University Career Center, so I'm currently a graduate student at KU here and work part-time as a graduate career coach. So we help students with everything in the career development process related to resumes, cover letters, the job search, internships, creating a LinkedIn profile, the online image, and salary negotiation is a piece of that. So I'll be representing that, but also can speak a little bit to my recent experience and continuing in this field and just recently negotiating my first salary out of grad school to be a career consultant at Washington State University.
I'm Marjorie Sanzi. I'm a technology manager at the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. I have been in the field of technology for several years, well over 20 years, first as a practitioner, and then I moved into technology leadership. Within our organization, right now, we are more focused in our IT department to try to make sure that we build a sustainable pipeline for talent within our IT organization. And so I recently took responsibility over that. I worked with most of the universities around our Kansas City area to try to ensure that we bring in individuals within our technology pipeline that would position us for the 22nd century. So look forward to the conversation, and I hope you have some interesting questions for us today.
Thank you all so much. So what we want is for this to be a conversation between you all. So if someone says something that you think is like super interesting and you're like, ooh, I just want to say something, please speak up. I'd rather you all talk more and I talk less. So we'll start this first question with you, Kate, but please feel free to jump in and help each other out. Since you love to negotiate, why don't you tell us about your first salary negotiation experience and how it went for you?
That's great. I had some insider information. I think that's kind of the key component is know your network, know the people who are friends of the people you're trying to work for. You can look up on LinkedIn through some of their kind of paid versions of how much you think that job is going to pay. They give ranges. There's salary.com, there's Glassdoor. I think the most important part of my first negotiation was knowing that the employer always has a range. There's not just this one magic number they're trying to stick with. And within that range, there's also always the range above that they're willing to pay when the right candidate comes along. Because as desperate as you are to get your first job and have your parents stop saying, please get off the couch, what's your first job going to be when you graduate? Don't be super desperate for it because they're just as desperate for you. It's really, really hard to find someone who not only has the skills they're looking for, but also kind of the personality and fitting in with that work culture. So I would say know that going into it. I was able to negotiate about $5,000 higher on my first job. It was entry-level marketing. It was like, I think they offered me $31,000. And I remember my dad was like, just don't respond. Sit on your hands if you have to. Thank them and that you'll, get back to them and stuff. And I was looking over my offer and I was like, Dad, this is so exciting. They have a cafeteria plan. I think I get lunches. And my dad's like, you don't get lunches. Like, that's a savings. That's not a cafeteria. I was like, oh. So I came back and countered and I said I was really excited about the opportunity, but I felt that the $35,000 was more my target range, and don't make the mistake of saying, I think. Say, based on the skills I'm bringing to the table, will really help. Because I think starting out entry level, right now, unfortunately, your opinion for what you think, you haven't kind of proved it yet. So I would stick away from saying I think.
Keisha, I see you shaking your head with a
I
lot
know,
of
I nod all the time. I'm always a part of every conversation going on. So I will say this, and I think, Kate, you brought up really good points. You've got to be intentional, right? Based on where you want to be, what employer you're seeking after. So I always say, networking is huge. It's very key. So get to know an HR professional, right? So build that network. There's so many more tools and resources now that's available to you than when I was first coming out of college. We won't talk about how many years ago. But, use the network. So LinkedIn, looking through what market targets are out there. So when you think about SHRM, which is Society of Human Resource Management, there's a lot of tools out there that you don't have to actually pay to get the information, but you want to do your research even with your university's career services group to know what that actual market target is. You want to look at geography, so what's kind of the cost of living in that area, and what's kind of the going rates and salaries in that space, and then based on your field and your industry. So I would say two things. One, get an HR professional within LinkedIn as a friend or a partner. And then also get an industry professional, someone who's in that particular industry, who's worked in that space for a number of years, who could be able to share information with you. And then, like you said, Kate, just making sure that you know your worth and be willing to at least go one round, right, from a negotiation standpoint.
I would also say, based on the geography, when someone gives you an offer, I would do the math when you're considering the offer on what that means your take-home pay is. So when you take 20 to 30% out for taxes, depending on what pay bracket you're in, like you're paying Social Security, okay, then take out the percentage you're going to put towards your 401k contribution. now take away potentially 20% that you're not making because you're a female. What does that leave you with to live off of? So that's like another reason why you really do need to fight and stand up for what you think you are worth during the negotiation part of it.
Ashley, you just did this. Oh, go ahead, Marjorie.
No, you.
I was gonna
You
say
both
that's
of you at the
like-
same time, whatever.
Go ahead.
I was just thinking about expenses and when you really factor out how much I'm left at the end of the day. When I went through my expenses, my biggest payment outside of rent is student loan debt. So that's going to hit you hard too if you have a lot of student loans to pay back, and it can really, alter what it looks like with that first salary in compared to the cost of living. So like my first negotiation, it sounds like it's a little bit different because of the field that I'm going into, and that I'm looking to be hired by other universities, and so there isn't as much of a range in that category to offer. And so I had to listen for certain language around like, this is our top offer, this is the highest we can give, this is what we've negotiated with HR to be the highest that we can possibly give you with your background, your skills, the education that you're coming in with. However, there were other things that I could think about to negotiate too, in terms of like, is there a relocation package involved? What do the benefits look like? What are some other perks if I wanted to take classes here? What would that look like? What discounts would I get? So I factored those things in, and additionally used my resources for people in that area who are in similar jobs and could comparatively tell me whether or not that was a realistic salary to go into with. And additionally, if it's public, you can find those numbers online too. So you can find somebody with a similar position that you're applying for and see what's listed as their salary. And then there's also the option to ask about what does a career ladder look like for this company or this position. And if they have it laid out for what the expectations are around those promotions, and what the timeline is, then you could see if that's something that you want to approach later on based on their timeline and their expectations. That could increase in the future too.
Well, when I got out of background graduate school, I was only too happy to take a job. So I did not negotiate. Didn't know how to, didn't know what I was supposed to do. Just very happy that I was at last done with school and actually getting into the workforce. But a few years later, just actually made a transition into technology a few years later. A few years later, when I got into technology, I began to understand the value of negotiating. The potential in that field was quite significant, and you needed to understand what your value was, what your skills are, and use that as a bargaining chip. It also helped that it was in an era where the demand for technology workforce was extremely high. And so it was easy for me to make that move in terms of ensuring that I was being paid equal pay for equal work. In instances when, I felt like, okay, maybe it's time for me to get a raise, and if it was not forthcoming, I self-promote. And I really would not advise that. This was in the dot-com days where, moving to other jobs was something that we did, and, quite frankly, you end up getting a huge bump in your salary every time you make that move. Today, though, when I tell people we're lucky, at least from a technology perspective, in Kansas City, from a women pay equity perspective, women make $1.01 for every dollar a man makes in technology. So Kansas City is actually the second best city for women in technology, next to Washington, D.C. So that problem isn't quite that obvious in Kansas City, but normally what I tell individuals as they're trying to get into the workforce, you really need to look at the holistic package. First of all, there are organizations that really invest in your growth and development. Coming out of college, sometimes It's very important because you can go into an organization and get stuck. You know, you can negotiate the best salary, go in there and there's really no growth for you. Look at organizations that really invest in their people, in their growth and their development. Look at what kind of programs they have to enable you to continue to grow. And I know I speak strictly from the perspective of a technologist, knowing that technology changes all the time, and I would be hard pressed to go out there and try to keep up with all this new technology and innovation. But how much will my company invest in my growth and development? And those are some of the things that you need to look at in any of the STEM fields. So that would be what I would advise at this point.
I think you all kind of touched on ways to prepare, like see what the salaries are in the field, see what kind of the culture is in the organization, obviously like technology and knowing your area and knowing where you're living and all of those things. But for a lot of people, right, you know all this, you do all the research. So what strategies or factors do you consider when you actually have that conversation? So you have all the research, you have all that information, but then taking that next step to actually talk to somebody can be frightening for some. So what kind of strategies would you maybe recommend? Lakeisha, maybe we could start this question with you, and please, everybody, feel free to jump in.
Yeah. So starting the conversation, I think you need to really lay out all of your skills, right? To really be able to say, based on what the goals of that business, what they need to be able to do to perform, how your skills match and align with those business goals and objectives. Because the main thing that you want to do is to say, I am of value to your organization, and these are the results that I can drive. That comes with, having confidence with yourself and knowing that you've put in the work, right? And you're coming to that conversation fully prepared to have a conversation that really is going to result in a yes, right, versus the no. So I would definitely say coming with your full outline of the things that you know based on that job and what's required, and based on the business objectives and the things that are most important to that business to perform and to hit their goals, how you are able to hit those targets and what your value is to that particular business in that organization. So I would say totally talk in the language of business goals, objectives, and what value you're able to contribute.
To find out what those goals are, it's often not listed in the job description. When you look through and you see the roles and responsibilities in the description, you should be asking, what does success look like for someone in this position? What are you hoping the goals are that this person can hit for you? What do you see your sales growth being? What is your business plan for the next 5 years? Then come back and remind them all the ways that you're perfect for those goals they're wanting to hit. And then in the end, never mention a number first. All she does is talk numbers all day long. Yes. She's 100% confident and comfortable talking about it. She's talking with people who it's a taboo to mention what your salary is, or do I say it first, or do I wait? Do I kind of start saying it and then pause and hope that they finish it? Get comfortable saying numbers, but in the end, never say the number first, because it's either going to be way out of the ballpark, which that's fine. I definitely interviewed for a job with someone I knew, and my number was over double of the salary. And I said, that's fine then, because I can't live off of the salary you're providing. And let's be honest, based on the job description you've mentioned, to keep someone happy in that position, you do need to pay more. So, and if you say the number first, you could just be like cutting yourself off at the knees, because Lakeisha's up here going, man, I would have offered them $20,000 more, and that was just the minimum for this range. So make the recruiter, make HR say what they always have a range in mind. So keep asking, and it's kind of like a game of tag. Like they're always going to try and make you say the number first, and you just come back saying, I'm looking for a competitive offer. There's many offers out there right now. I'm looking at more than one offer. Now just keep like skirting the question and putting it back on them.
I have a question to that point. So, as an HR person, when you are asking, like, you're playing this like runaround game, if you will, what are you looking for? You know, what are you looking for when you're asking this question again? Or, you know, like, are you looking for somebody who's aware of the market? Is this like a test for you, or is it maybe to save money where you can? I mean,
We typically know our number. Okay, so when we ask, what is your salary requirement, right? We're just trying to understand where you are, okay? Some people know if they're gonna do some research initially, right? And so they're gonna come in already kind of predetermined with, okay, the range could be, and I'm just saying for engineers, because I talk in that space all the time. So they already know that it's going to be between 60 to 70K, right, coming out of college. And so for us, we want to be able to determine, based on that person's internships or research that they've done, how in depth do they really want to be able to get to either that higher in range or lower in range. And so we will kind of sit there and kind of work through, let's talk through what your experience is and those types of things. But we already kind of know a target number, but we're just trying to have a good conversation with candidates, right? So feel comfortable being confident in the interview and in that negotiation to really just hone in on the things that you've done and how well you've performed, right? So I think that's the biggest part is, how strong are you going to come? Game on, right? And so you should always play up and wait for that final initial offer, and then always know that you've got to go one round. So play tennis with us, right?
To Letitia's,
sorry, go ahead.
to Letitia's point though, I think the confidence factor, especially for women, is really critical when you're negotiating a salary. And no matter how prepared you are, you always second guess yourself. And you can rehearse all the questions that you believe are going to be asked of you, and once they ask a question that you do not exactly prepare for, it throws you off your game. Do your research, but above all, you need to understand what you're bringing to the table. Believe in yourself, no amount of pep talk from somebody else is going to do that. It helps, but it will take you to understand what you want and understand what you need to ask for, understand what success looks like in terms of, yes, I got the offer that I wanted, and go to the negotiation table with that self of inner confidence, a confidence that you need to know here. At the end of the day, you don't want to leave there and feel like, or accept the job and feel like I got cheated, right? So what do you need to do to prepare yourself for that? You do your research. You go in there, and sometimes it can be back and forth, but I really will not advise you going back and forth so many times. As an entry or new entrant into the workforce, sometimes I know in my organization we get turned off by that, because we offer you more than that. So we don't mind going back and forth, but we keep going back and forth. It tells me you did not do your research, you don't know what your value is, you don't know what is worth to an organization as ours, and so we could very well just say okay, we're not going to move forward with your candidacy. So come in, understand you, know you, be confident of what you have, and they either take it or they leave it.
Sorry, I'm direct.
No, you go for it. This is your panel.
This can be for any of you, but I'm just curious if you are like waiting on an offer and like let's say you're on the phone or talking with someone in person and the offer comes in a lot lower than you were expecting, and you immediately know that you would never accept that number, should you still take a step back and wait a few days before you approach that conversation so it like looks like you took time to consider, or should you just be honest and like blunt or upfront about how you're feeling about it?
It's always advisable to give a measured response, because for one thing, I always tell people it helps you practice, right? Especially being new to the job market, it helps you practice. So when you take a step back and you think about it at this, even say overnight, although you know you're going to say no, it allows you to respond in a manner that's measured and thoughtful, and it always leaves a good impression. Even if not for the employer, for yourself, like, wow, I handled that well. And that continues to build your confidence in how well you can negotiate those conversations.
I would also question if someone was on the phone with you and saying, hey, I'm going to send you an offer, I'm going to call you. They're trying to pressure you into taking the offer. Maybe they know it's not their strongest offer. So even if they call you, take the call and just thank them for the offer, and that you really need to take a second and put your thoughts together and decide what you want to do. Being a strategist, I never walk into a conversation not having my thoughts and strategy for that conversation mapped out. And so if someone's like in the heat of the moment, knowing this person's just out of college, they're really excited for any job offer, they don't have that much experience negotiating an offer, like remind yourself that you deserve your own moment to think and not give in to that pressure.
And just to add on to that, we do all of our offers verbal. We want to have that engagement, okay? So we want to connect with that particular candidate, but then we're expecting you to give us answers, questions, ask questions. So let me understand what the offer is. So this is the base that you provided. Does that come with the sign-on bonus? And can you explain what the benefits are? Is there relocation available? And what does that entail, right? Are there additional documents that you can forward to me so that I can review everything based on what the full offer, package, and all the details? So they're looking for that from a hiring manager standpoint, and even from a recruitment standpoint. We're wanting to have that conversation. So we've already carved out 30 minutes for that conversation with you. Even if you don't accept at that point in time, right? And then the other thing is just being courteous. Thank you so much. I appreciate the call. I appreciate you spending time to walk me through the offer. Now give me time. What's the deadline? When do you need a response back? So that I can be able to review this information and really make sure that I've got all the information that I need in order to make an informed decision.
So I guess my follow-up question then is, when you want to go back and have the next conversation and try and increase your offer, should you ask to do that over the phone or in person, or how would you go about asking for that second touch point?
Yeah, so that would be the same thing. When's a good time that I can follow back up with you? Are you available during what hours, what time, what phone number can I call you back at? So get some of that information during that conversation as well. Or you can respond back via email, right? So if they provide you documents via email based on the electronic offer or some of the detailed documents that you've requested, then you can be able to engage with that conversation to say, hey, I would love an opportunity to talk through the offer. I've got further questions, or I want to, have that follow-up conversation with you. That was a good question. Yes, there's two hands.
Yeah, we'll take those too.
Okay, so something that I've kind of been noticing through job applications, I think about half of the jobs I've applied for, they've had a required field where you have to enter a salary, and it does not allow a range, and it has to be numerical, so you can't write negotiable. How do you tackle that when you apply for a position and you don't want to just throw out a number and, like you said, either cut yourself off at the knees or way overshoot it, because you can't put a range and it makes you put something there? Like, what would be the best way to go about that?
What I do, based on my research, if I know a range in terms of what the market value is for that particular job, I just do a midpoint.
Okay.
Right? So at least that gives me some wiggle room to negotiate on. So, yeah, you're right. Lots of companies, they'll make you put the number. You cannot put a range, you put the number, and it's a required field.
Would you suggest putting like 0 or a number that's obviously not what you would really want, just in an attempt to avoid it? I've done that on
So-
so I don't know if that's like a horrible idea.
That can actually disqualify you.
So I guess my question would be, before you're filling out this form, it sounds like it's maybe more on the corporate side. So like I work for an ad agency, and I don't think there's an agency out there that has this kind of computer generated form where you're inputting, like you're redoing your whole resume into this text, thing after you've spent all that time laying out your resume nicely. I came across that once. Usually I'm talking to the person before I'm actually filling it out. So I've kind of maybe had that phone interview or some sort of informal, just kind of chat about the job to make sure I'm serious about it. And then, like me being me, I obviously tack on like the next range or two. And then you just go from there.
These are all great questions, guys. I mean, you're better than my questions, so good job. So we've really touched on your first salary. I think that it's really important specifically for a lot of people in the audience. How many of you guys are looking to graduate this year? You of you? Congratulations! Let's give all of them a round of applause.
Any engineers in the audience? Raise them high.
So let's look at, let's say that all of you all get an amazing job, right? And all of you in the audience should get an amazing job anyways, or you already have one. So let's look at breaking away from that initial salary. What tips do you have about when it's appropriate to talk to your employer about a promotion or a raise? Ashley, we'll start this question with you. When do you think it's appropriate, and how do you go about that conversation?
What's the first part of the question?
So do you have any tips for when it's appropriate to talk to your employer about a promotion or a raise?
Oh man, I'm not at that point yet. So in the position that I just recently took, part of my negotiation was asking if they had a career ladder in place, and they outlined one for me. I had multiple offers, and so at the other universities I was asking, do you also have a career ladder in place? And some of the answers were not a formal one, but informally we will, support you in promoting yourself and looking for other opportunities to grow. And that didn't sit as well with me as having a formal one. So I did end up taking this other position for a variety of reasons. So in this role, I will follow that guideline. I asked for documentation like some of the other panelists mentioned around, getting things in writing to indicate what their timeline is, what their expectations are. And so, focusing in on that, keeping track of that stuff, whether you have Excel spreadsheets or it on your calendar, and keeping note of your accomplishments if you can, maybe on like a weekly basis would be ideal, or a monthly basis. What are you doing to meet those expectations? To really highlight the skills, the things that you're bringing to the table to meet the objectives and the goals. And then you can bring that information to them around that timeline that either is in a formal career ladder, or you talk to them about what their timeline is. And then set up a meeting to discuss those points. Does that kind of touch on?
Yeah. That brings a follow-up question for me. How many of you all on the panel have successfully negotiated a raise? Marjorie, you want to talk about that experience and tips that you have from doing that?
Well, again, it went back to me going out and doing my research. I had taken a position and really didn't quite do a good job at researching what the market was, what the market value for that position was. And after I took the position, I started doing my research and actually went back and said, oops. I said, oops, this is what I found. This is the market value for the position. And there were other individuals in that same position. And I did challenge my my management to the fact that I knew for a fact there were some people that were highly placed more than I was, and I did not believe that from an experience perspective they had anything over me, and so the adjustment was quickly made. But to Ashley's point though, and that again was a very unusual position or situation, I always say you have to be your own advocate. If it's a career ladder in place, formal one, you understand what the requirements are for you to move to the next level. make sure that you're not just waiting until the end of the year or at some checkpoint for you to have that conversation with your supervisor. Ensure that you're constantly engaging in career conversations with your managers, so they understand that, you know, you're on the move. You know, I mean, being stuck is not an option for you. You want to continue to learn, to grow, and build on your career. So it is your responsibility to make sure you're initiating that conversation. Oftentimes, managers, especially managers that do manage individuals in highly technical areas, and I can only speak based on my context, they get so bogged down with the day-to-day, and with all good intentions, they still don't have enough time to work with you in evolving your career and helping you grow in that area. It is your responsibility to do that. So be your own advocate and make sure that you're having those career conversations, because when you're having those career conversations, then you'll know when that natural step is for you to go to the next level. And through that career conversation, you have established a rapport with your supervisor, and so it becomes easy for you to talk about that raise, you know.
I will add to, when you do your research with the employer and the organization, find out what the job posting process is, because internally sometimes the employer might say you need to stay within this position for X amount of months, right? Because they want to get a return on you as an employee in that current role that you come into. So I would say, you know, learn what that policy is, right, upon entry or upon negotiation with that particular employer. The second piece is having those career conversations with your supervisor, manager upon entry to understand what does it take for you to get to that next level, right? What's that next step? Typically, I mean, I worked for a lot of organizations here within the Kansas City area, and sometimes they want 9 months for you to stay in that current position. And with us at Honeywell right now, it's 18 months, okay? And so that's because there's so much to learn, right? Before you really could see yourself advancing to that next level so that you're prepared. And then making sure that they have enough time to really invest in you and to give you all the tools and the resources that you're in need of to be able to move to that next position or promotion opportunity. So just ask some of those questions. It's safe to do that. And then a lot of times in your new employee orientation, they'll roll out those policies to you as well. So you'll know and be well abreast of some of those things that the organization deems as true promotional transition.
It's pretty hard to raise your salary dramatically internally unless you are adding like a certification for technology. It's a lot easier when you're the new shiny object that a company is attracted to, that they think is going to solve all their problems for that position, and they're willing to pay you more than they're paying their existing employees because they're trying to get the good talent in. That being said, I think you'll notice on a lot of people's resumes now, at least on kind of the marketing and advertising side of it, it's really common that people are finding new jobs every 2 years. It's no longer looking like, oh, your resume looks like you kind of jumped ship a few times. The unfortunate part is if you really do want to increase your salary, you're going to have to move around. So employers are kind of catching on to that. Some have experienced it themselves now that they're moved up into management positions, and they're realizing, hey, we can't just give them, say, $5,000 more. Because again, do the math. If you're getting 26 paychecks a year, you remove taxes, at the end of the day, you think, oh, I just got $5,000 more. 20 bucks a paycheck, 18 bucks a paycheck. So it is really hard. So that's why that original salary negotiation is really important, because you might end up with a company that maybe they can't do bonuses, but they'll give you that 3% kind of annual raise just because the cost of living keeps increasing. So really, it means it's not a raise because it just keeps the same thing. But do your homework like they were saying. And I have been at a job where every day in OneNote I would write down things that I did, because it was one of those jobs where you're just, it's 100 miles an hour every single day. And at the end of the day, like, I know I was busy, I didn't even eat lunch, what did I do today? And I would go back and look at my notes and I'm like, I've done a lot of stuff here within 3 months. And then suddenly a promotion came. So some places have 18 months, some have less. A lot of jobs I have, there's always like an annual review. And within that annual review, most places will do a quarterly review. If your manager says, oh, we don't do quarterly reviews here, and you're kind of hearing rumors that like people's annual review comes up and then suddenly they can't even get their meeting scheduled for their manager, like you should set your own goals and say, hey, this quarter I was thinking of, I want to do more speaking engagements. Speaking engagements is not part of my job description or responsibilities, but it's a goal that I would like to work with. Or I'm looking at growing my skills here, I'd like to work with this team member in another department to do that. That way, if you feel like your manager isn't listening, or because you're the one thinking of like your promotions and what you want, and that's probably not the first thing your manager's thinking of is, how can I get this person a promotion really fast or an increase in pay? You just gotta, set your own goals and go from there.
That's great. Yeah.
Question.
Yeah. Oh yes, please.
So if you are offered a promotion, they're gonna just tell you like a number, and they're expecting you to be excited and happy about it, and they're not trying to like desperately recruit you like they would, a new candidate. Is there any room for negotiation there, or what would that look like?
I had a really successful promotion opportunity where I was able to negotiate with my boss for more money, because I knew more about what they really wanted me to do in that job, right? And so he came with hey, he's all excited coming in because he knows I'm all bubbly. Hey, Keisha, got a new, position for you, and I fought really hard for this number. And so I just kind of kept it kind of cool. Okay, great. Send me the details, and I knew exactly that I was going to be traveling now 50% more, right, at territories all over the U.S. And so that was one of my opportunities to negotiate for more money. And then I knew, based on the business that I was going to be supporting, they were having huge turnover. So knowing that entail helped in knowing exactly what I was walking into. And so I was able to get an additional $10,000 because I knew exactly what they were wanting me to do. And so it worked out in my favor. And I was the gal, right? He didn't have anybody else within the business that could be able to transition into that position. So don't feel like you're stuck, right? Internally, you still have an opportunity to have that conversation. And if they want you, they want you, right? So.
And ask what that range is for the promotion. Just say, hey, I know what the range is for my current position and where I'm at. What is the salary range for this promoted position? They should be able to tell you. If they say, I don't know, say, okay, great, go check with HR. Just let me know.
Yeah.
And because I was HR, I knew
And
what
she
the
knew
salary
all of it. So.
No, but I did know. I did know.
Another question?
Yeah. Do you see any differences of how how you? Let me rephrase it. Do you see any differences in the negotiations when you're entering a male-dominated field, like as a female? Do you see any differences there?
Yes. In engineering, in Honeywell, I will say specific. I won't say just in engineering, okay? In Honeywell, it's a male-dominated industry and environment right now. And so I will say, looking at our experienced engineers, looking at the range based on like our managers and supervisors, we've got a disparity, right? We don't have enough women engineers in our business. So we are huge right now with valuing diversity, okay? And so we are willing to do more negotiations with those individuals, as well as looking at opportunities to promote, right? And so we are having to have a different type of conversation with our leadership to really be able to think more diverse and to figure out ways that we can be able to incorporate adding additional dollars. But initially, it was off. We were really off base, but we had to spend some time to see where those particular gaps were. So that's a part of that opportunity as well. Knowing the organization, knowing that particular industry, and being able to be confident in going in and go top of range, right? So that you can be able to negotiate additional dollars based on what that particular business is in need of.
Do we have another question?
Yeah, my question, when you're giving that counter offer and you have that range in mind, do you traditionally want to look at the higher end of that range under the assumption that they're going to return a lower offer as like the renegotiation, or is there like a certain percent that's too high to counter with?
I would say, I mean, you want to be able to know what that mid-range is, but wait for the actual offer, right, to then be able to determine what your counter offer is going to be. I think that's probably the only kind of goal or target that you want to kind of go with versus coming in at the top saying, this is what I expect, right? And then now that particular organization hiring manager may determine, wow, your skill sets in comparison to the other candidates that I've reviewed, they're coming in here around the mid, right? So don't throw yourself out of the negotiation of being able to come in where you want to be and with having that offer to come out with, right?
I'd say there's a book that I would say you should run out and get, which is called Never Split the Difference. It's a guy who used to be on the Kansas City Police Department. He then became the FBI's top hostage negotiator and now runs his own consulting business. It's so good that I would recommend listening to it on tape. So when I commute from Lawrence to Overland Park, I listen to a lot of books on tape. I would also get his book. The reason I say both is you can see the voice tones they use and how he'll mimic people's voices and how he'll relax his voice or raise his voice, what words to say, what words not to say. And it will kind of help you with, do you set low anchors or high anchors with numbers? It's been one of the best books I've ever listened to or read. That being said, I think it's all situational. So let's say the HR person says, our range is 42 to 48,000. So being the applicant, you're hearing 48 and they're hearing, oh, I said 42. If you do feel like your experience is at the higher range, go for it. And again, it's not I expect, it's I've earned this higher range. Here's what I do on a daily basis of why I deserve that amount. And just keep it short. I mean, you don't have to go on and on and on why you deserve it. Kind of think of what males would do. I do this and this. I get this done. Here's the numbers I see from doing this action. People can't argue with that. You can't argue with the data, the outcome of your actions. So,
I love that all the guys are laughing,
right? It's in your
Laughing in agreement.
yeah, I mean, no. It's good. That's good.
I have a question for Ashley, maybe that we talked about in a negotiation conversation, you can do your research and say that you're worth different things, but you mentioned student loans. Would it be inappropriate to say, yes, this meets the cost of living, this salary does, but I have other responsibilities, such as student loan debt or child dependence, things like that? Is that inappropriate to bring up?
From the resources that I reviewed and utilized in the Career Center, to be honest, talking with other colleagues, really, I think, shift it more towards what you bring instead of what your responsibilities are. So focus on, again, the skills that you have, the accomplishments that you've made, because they're going to care. that speaks to their ears much more than what you have to deal with outside of work. Even though it's a very big reality, I would say that, but
That would be, I mean, that's been, I mean, I could probably write a book with just stuff that I've seen in cover letters and counter offers, yeah. But that would definitely not be something that you would want to present to a manager. Is, you know, got sent a note saying, you know, I'm married, my wife likes all of these different things, and I have 2 children, and I want to put them in private school, and we were just like, oh my gosh, way more than what we needed to know about this person, but thanks for sharing. But it was not a good negotiation discussion. So I would just keep it really just towards your skills and the things that you are going to be able to bring to the organization.
Actually, you said like in government and universities, there's like less of a range that you can go off of, and there's like other things that you can negotiate. Is one of the things you can negotiate like they're paying for your tuition, like how much they'll pay?
potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I would say can be.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say across the board. But yeah, so, you know, I'm getting my degree in counseling psychology and going into vocational psych for stuff that's more of a set range and there's not as much funding. But you can definitely consider that as part of the bigger package, for sure. There's some other hands up just a second ago too.
So you guys have said that when they initially give you that offer and give you some sort of range, and then it's good to kind of take a step back and then come back with another offer. Should you stay within that range that they give you, or if you, you know, are trying to get as much as you can, do you want to step out of that range, or will they kind of dismiss you if you do that?
That depends if that range is aligned with your research, you know. So again, the onus is on you to also do some background work, right? So come to the table with some context. You should have a range based on your research as to what the what that job is valued in the market. And so if they come with a proposal that's within that range, then you have a clear indication as to if you're negotiating up or down, or if you're comfortable within that range. But if you're just going in blind, then, I mean, might as well just, you know, take a shot in the dark.
Yeah, and I would say, again, it's not always about the number. Again, make sure that you feel confident that you have the talent to back it up, because otherwise employers will see right through it. And that's kind of when, kind of what Lakeisha said was, you know, then people are just throwing out numbers like, I expect, or I want this. And it's like, why do you want it? Like, I'm surrounded by a lot of other talented people currently. Like, why should we offer you this job? And go from there. But definitely look at vacation days. That's something where there's a lot of flexibility in. I've had one job where I kind of knew the exact salary. I'd already done some like passive negotiating, like not formal. And so I went in really hard on vacation days. And then the job also offered like free healthcare. The company paid for it in your paycheck. That's a big difference. That's depending if you're a single person or if you have dependents, you know, that could start with at least $100 to $150 not coming out of your paycheck each time. So that's something to look at too.
I have a question. So I've heard oftentimes that if you negotiate your first salary, then you might not be given a promotion as fast because they've already paid a lot of money for where you're currently at, and they might not have funding to, I guess, like help you move up the ladder. What would be your response to that, and like, do you agree or disagree? Because that's like advice that I've been given, where like if you negotiate let's say $5,000 off your first offer coming out of school, then you're probably going to be stuck in that position for a while.
I haven't seen that in my experience. The offer is the offer, right? And now your potential now within the organization is up to you, right? So it's how you perform once you get there. And I think it goes back to, you know, you've negotiated, so now you got to show the company, you know, and get that ROI, that return on that investment. But
never feel bad that you negotiated a great salary. Because you never know that your coworker that sits 4 feet away from you maybe gets paid higher than you, and they don't feel bad about it all day long. And never let a manager or a boss try and use that against you. I think that's a huge red flag that that's probably someone you don't want to work for. And maybe seek like other management within the company or look elsewhere outside the company.
Yeah, I just don't have any experience or exposure to that.
I don't think that's customary. I've never experienced that. I don't believe people do that. I mean, when you go into an organization, if you're a high potential individual, you're a high potential individual. It doesn't matter if you outwitted your salary negotiation and got a good bill for yourself. Good for you. Just go in and continue to perform at a very high level, and still continue to provide opportunities for you for growth. And so that's another area that, and oftentimes you may have multiple offers, and this is a situation where you have multiple offers. Because I know I've talked to individuals, they tell me, okay, I have a couple of more offers that I need to consider, and sometimes they could all be around the same range. And so what tips the balance for you? My advice usually is, after going through the interview process, the negotiating process, meeting the leadership in the organization, where do you feel like you're going day one, and feel that sense of belonging and feel like they are just as invested in you as you are in the organization? That should always be the one that, that you choose, because that's where you'll experience your most growth. That's really the experience that I've had.
And adding on to that, I really try to get a pulse of, once we hire new engineers into Honeywell, I'll go and just ask, what have you heard, right? Kind of what's going on? Why do engineers stay here in Kansas City with Honeywell? And so we pride ourselves on work-life balance, the technology, right? So a lot of the engineers want to do meaningful work, and they know that they're a part of a great mission, right? They can see what we're doing and what their investment from the point of their development. So you want to be able to also, when you come in to do like an interview, ask those questions. Why are people staying within the organization? And what's your turnover rate? What do you pride yourself, on based on the culture? Those are great questions, because you want to make sure that you're going to be a good fit for that organization too. And so, we do a lot of mobile, and we have a 980 where individuals work for 9 days, 9 hours, and they get that every other Friday off, right? And so those are just benefits and perks, and individuals, especially millennials, okay? I like it too, but, having that flexibility of your work schedule and work-life balance is important, right? Because you want to still have social and do all these other things that are fun and be engaging within the community. So just additional things to consider.
Question. What would be the best practice for amount of time? Like, should you ask if you receive an offer, you're talking on the phone, you say, I really value this offer, I'd like to think about it. Should you ask, I know you said ask what's a good time to get back, but is there a time frame that's like an appropriate, like is there too long of a time to sit on it before responding? Because obviously they might move forward with another candidate. How do you approach that with whoever you're talking to?
Well, if they've given you the offer, they're not going to move forward with another candidate, right? I mean,
Right.
They're waiting to hear back from you.
Right. But, to where you're not making them wait, really, like an appropriate amount.
We give a deadline.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we're going to tell you that we want to hear back from you within this time frame, or the offer will expire. Okay. So with that in mind, we give 2 weeks. So I'm just throwing that out from the date of offer. So generally the organization will share that with you, and that gives you the time to do everything that you need to do from research and, and gathering your facts and data to then, come back to that
opportunity to have your presentation.
Depending on your field and your industry too, like my position, I had a couple other interviews that had already been paid for me to go fly out to those interviews, and I was just forward about that with them. Like, I'd like to entertain all offers, and I'm still very excited and interested in this one, but you know, what does your timeline look like with this kind of being my timeline for these interviews? And they were, in this situation, we were very flexible about that, and I had up to a month to decide, which is maybe not as commonly heard of, but because of our communication, I think it allowed me to have that. Had I not maybe shared that information with them, they may have given me less time.
So those, I'm really surprised. I think it's interesting to find out these timeframes. So working in marketing, especially on the agency side, agencies will make sure that everyone is at a max workload and then some before they can hire someone on. The downside is you're kind of working a lot. The benefit is it's good job security. You know, they're not hiring on a bunch of people and then they're going to let people go because they realize, oh, we hired too many people. That being said, if I ask someone, can I have 2 weeks to think about it, I don't even know if they would say goodbye. They'd probably just hang up the phone because they would immediately move on to the next, their number 2 candidate. I would also maybe fine tune the language you use and say, can I have 48 hours to review this offer? Not think about this offer, right? Because think could rub people the wrong way. Are we not good enough for you anymore? I thought you were excited about this offer. What is there more to think about, right? So really, even if it means like writing down words you're going to use on a piece of paper in front of you to help you stay calm and remember those words, I would recommend doing that to help just keep a positive approach about it.
And I think, yeah, industry, field specific, it's going to be way different. So knowing that before you go in can give you a timeline to anticipate too.
I would say for me it's 24 to 48 hours. And if you say that you have another interview lined up with another company or you do have a second offer on the table, they're either going to counter immediately and try and get you to work for them then. They'll wait, or they're going to say, I'm sorry, we need to move right now, right? And then that's kind of another red flag. Like, why do they, you can't wait until one business day? You know, why are you not giving me? So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to our panelists. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to catch them on their way out and ask them. I'm sure that you all would be more than happy to share some more because you guys have great questions, and I know it's probably all very new. A lot of it's new to me too. So thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Just a few more tips from the career services that we'd love to share with you. Is this on it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Of course. So this might clear up some questions that you have as well.
They shared some amazing advice, suggestions, and really practical tips to how to approach this. Something that we didn't talk about in detail was what that benefits package includes. So not every company is going to offer everything that's on the slides. However, these are all things that should be considered because Kate had mentioned the cost of healthcare, right? So KU contributes part of my healthcare premiums a month. I pay the other part. Some companies pay that entire premium, which would save me and my family a couple $100s a month if I worked for an employer that paid for everything. So you definitely want to consider all those things because that base salary is only a portion of what they're offering you. And often you get this package that says your salary is $45,000, but the package that they're offering you, the total value is $85,000. Well, where would that other $40,000 go? Like, why don't I just get that in check? And that's their investment in you and the investment in the culture that their company has. So making sure that you really evaluate those benefits packages, including stock interest, your vacation time. I know we have employers that are incredibly progressive in offering 6 to 8 weeks of paid leave for maternity and paternity leave if you have a child in that year. That's on top of whatever that leave is that you usually get, but you have to have that qualifying event to do it. So really asking the right questions with those benefits packages, and whether that's asking the company themselves, talking to your recruiter, talking to HR and saying, can you talk me through what this means? Or coming to the career centers, or going to a parent and sitting down, there is so much more value in those benefits package than some of our entry-level talent really realizes in evaluating those offers. So it's not fair to say, company A is offering me $60,000, company B is offering me $65,000, so I'm gonna go with company B, because they may have a whole different package available. Other things just to really hit on, being transparent in that negotiation process. So when we were talking about timelines, our recruiters, especially for those of you that participate in the recruitment cycle, right? So in engineering, our recruiters come in the fall and they do a lot of their recruiting for full-time hires as well as interns in that fall time frame. They know you're not applying for one job at a time. If you are not hustling and you're not applying for 5, 6, 7, 8,000 jobs at a time, they're gonna wonder what's wrong. Like, what, you don't want a job, so you're applying for one at a time? Who has time for that? So they know that you're looking for employment. It is absolutely okay to say to a recruiter, I've accepted 3 other interviews and have them set up next week. Is it possible to get, and if you can establish a particular deadline. So a month may seem like a lot of time, but if you say, I should hear back from other employers by X date, can I give you a decision in 3 weeks? On this date, they are more likely to say yes, because they know that the information that you're giving them is really accurate and honest. So being transparent, they are people too, they have been in your shoes, they understand where you're coming from, so telling them your whole story is okay. Again, the career centers on campus are here for this purpose. So if you have particular questions, if you're in that process where you're getting offers or you're trying to navigate, I had an interview yesterday, they're supposed to call me back on Friday, but I have an interview on Monday, come into one of the career centers. It doesn't matter what your discipline is. If I have, last summer I think I met with a biology student 5 different times. He stumbled in, we had a great rapport, it doesn't matter. So get the help that you need in making good decisions for yourself. And something else, we also at KU understand the value of what they were discussing earlier, making a network and creating those connections to help you really ask good questions about preparing for your jobs after college. So what is coming down the pipeline is a campus-wide mentoring initiative at mentoring.ku.edu. If you sign up tomorrow, there may be a wait period, but we are developing an avenue that's a little better than LinkedIn, right? Adds the context around, because we tell you all the time, go on LinkedIn and try to find an alumni at Honeywell that happens to be a Jayhawk and try to link with them and hope that they're going to connect with you and you can ask them for coffee. This platform will allow that to happen in a more organic way for Jayhawks in particular. So for those of you that are, well, actually all of you in the room, those of you that will soon be alumni, those of you that are returning in August, please watch for that. So mentoring.ku.edu, there will be advertisements for it in the fall, but that will be a Jayhawk network that can help you answer these questions too. Reach out to people for these types of questions. Are there any other questions before we adjourn? Can we give our panel another round of applause?